Okay, we are up and going in the college prep English class. It's Excellence in Education. Let me find, share our screen here. Okay, screen sharing's up and going. We have a number of interesting things to cover. Now, I want to make sure that I'm finding everything from everyone right now. Let's see. Brian, I think you handed one in the old classroom.
Yes.
And
I wasn't sure where to put it since.
Oh, that's fine. Right now it's still working.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I put a vocabulary journal entry in the old classroom.
oh, okay.
And
That's a good
I don't
point.
have
We've
the
got to move those over.
login information for the new one, the new classroom.
I did send out specifically to you another invitation. I don't think the first one got sent, so I made sure that you were in the classroom, and I sent another one. That would have happened right after class last week, or not after class last week, either Thursday or Friday. If you don't get it, we'll figure it out. Anyway, I'm going to try actually to do most of the class in the new classroom, which is lumpy and awkward and ill-designed and missing features that I relied upon in the previous version. But it's free.
Yeah.
Now the other one, I've got my own server, and so it was free there too, but I just can't seem to get a new one up and going on that server. So we will work around things. Okay, let's go up to our agenda here. And of course, the first thing we want to do probably is look at projects that have come in, one of which is a poem that will be recited. Would you like to go first? Or would you like to go later on?
Later on, a little bit.
Okay. Okay, let's look at some of the things we have here. Okay, I'm going to assume, I think, that Azariah is going to be watching online or either in real time or after the fact. And so we'll go through his, but let's look at this one first.
Will anyone be watching the Republican debate tonight? This is, say, the biggest debate out of all in
I think
history.
that's a wonderful idea. We should do that. But one of the things I would like to challenge you to do, if you don't mind, is sit there with your little notebook or your tablet or whatever and note the grammar mistakes and stylistic mistakes and mismatches and dangling participles and everything you come across. Now you know what dangling participles are all about, right? We came across those in the Hunger Games. They're also covered in the book. All of this is covered in the book, and I'm afraid I use the book generally only for reference when I find it necessary. But participles, for example, flying over the city, I didn't see the bird until it hit the tower. What's wrong with that sentence?
Well, are you flying over the city?
Exactly. The participle is flying over the city. It's a present participle. If you say, having climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, Rupert's hairdryer required constant adjustment. You understand that this is a dangling modifier, but the thing is as soon as you have a participle, whatever follows it has to be the subject of that participle. Otherwise, you get things messed up. And one of the errors that I expect we will see more than anything else in, at least in American unscripted political discourse, is lack of parallelism. If you have, he came into the room, he sat on the chair and writing something. You see, he did this, he did that, and suddenly we get a progressive verb in there where we had that's a poor example. But when you have multiple things that are in parallel with each other, you have to make sure they actually are in parallel with each other. And that's one of the mistakes that Americans, even academics, tend to make dreadfully and without contrition and without reserve. Okay, let's look at this one. What was the socially experimenting? You really opened a can of worms here. Let's think about that one a little bit. Would you like to explain a little bit what you think could be accomplished if social experimenting were taking place? Who should be in charge of doing it and deciding what to do and whom to do it to?
I haven't really thought about who holds the experiments, but I think just in random locations around the world, I don't know, it would be interesting to find the results and how people would react.
Well, from an academic perspective, it's an interesting thought. Of course, experimenting on humans has always been fraught with problems. They do it, however, in a number of countries, notably Russia and China, North Korea, and they're not organized enough to do it particularly well in the Middle East, I don't think, but they probably would. But the question is that the kind of society one wants to live in? We've done it here.
Yeah.
And so experimenting for the purpose of academic advancement is certainly understandable, but we're never allowed to do it on humans. And a lot of people feel we shouldn't do it on animals either.
Then how will we advance in technology?
That's a very good question. I think one of the ways one can do that to a remarkable degree that was never feasible before is computer simulation.
Oh, yeah.
But again, humans are awfully difficult to predict. It's hard to make sure that you're actually simulating a human response particularly well. But let's look at this. You are advocating social manipulation, essentially, for the purpose of learning and perhaps for the purpose of educating the populace to respond to things. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, you will notice that I cannot put things in boldface and red in the new classroom. It doesn't know how to do red, and it lets you say boldface, but it ignores it. At least when it's pasted in like this. I don't know what tags are surrounding all of this stuff, but something in there is preventing the boldface from functioning. So we have to look for the square brackets and imagine. Okay, social experiments would not only benefit the state, as the public could learn and benefit from observing such actions as well. You're making an assumption in this first sentence that the benefit of the public is actually something the state is interested in.
I suppose.
States in general tend more to be interested in their own preservation than the preservation of the people. Take, for example, stage complex strategized bank robbery could potentially not only prepare but educate society. As I say here, good parallel construction, because you're saying could not only prepare but educate. You've got the right type of verb put together there and used in combination. And that's what I'm saying is one of the most common errors that one encounters. To make brief decisions at any given time that could possibly save lives, while also making them. Now here the problem is them is a dangling anaphor. And what is an anaphor? An anaphoric reference is a reference back to an antecedent, generally by a pronoun. And in this case, you have a pronoun, but it's hard to know what them is referring to. And so we've got a dangling anaphor. We need to patch that sort of thing. I think and act appropriately if a future scenario would ever take place. Now, this is common usage in American uh, informal speech, but in if a future scenario were ever to take place, is clearly correct. The other one is
flows
really
better
not
off
good.
the tongue.
Now, do you know what this particular construct is called? In a future scenario, if a future scenario were ever to take place,
No, I do not know.
it's called subjunctive. Which chapter in the book is subjunctive? Does anybody remember? That's one of the problems we're going to have. In my old classroom, I had the entire textbook in class.
Oh.
The one we were using in the fall wouldn't accept the whole thing; it was too big. And this one, of course, I haven't got it in there at all. But yeah, so you can look it up in the index. It's one of the major features, and I don't know, one of the chapters in there. Anyway, I do want to cover that because I want you to understand there are two types of subjunctive. This is really the important one, and the foundational one. This is used in a situation contrary to fact. In other words, we are postulating something which hasn't happened, may not happen, but and so we have that were ever to, and the other subjunctive one, we'll talk about that one at some point. Okay, prepared citizens. Now we're talking about making prepared citizens, but of course, if you're going to muck up some sort of a disaster and spring it on the citizens, you can only do that once or twice.
Yeah, not a daily thing.
Note spelling here.
Yeah.
Lude. Is that actually a word? Did it get through your spelling checker?
I guess so. I don't
It
know.
may indeed mean something,
I'm
but it
pretty
doesn't
sure
mean what you meant.
lewd with a W and D, but I may have switched to that. I don't know, because I don't remember putting lewd, the U.
Right. Lewd intentions, disorderly conduct, or even everyday commonplace violence. Again, a nice parallel construction. Okay, educating the public is very important in that they could not only, you see what I mean? The sense is utterly unnecessary in there, but in that is a nice construct. It works fine. Let's go down here. Millions of lives could be saved in countless different horrible situations. Have the possibility to be doesn't add anything to that sentence.
It's kind of just.
Let's see, we've got this last part here, as I said, grammatical but incredibly lumpy and fumbling. Let's just see if I can read through it. If every basic person has a certain amount of knowledge in the area of safety, self-defense, and strategies to throw off the juveniles, criminals alike, the chance of survival or even safety would be quite a noticeable amount higher. I know that you can say that better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe put it a better way.
I have an interesting observation here where we're talking about juveniles and criminals. Juveniles who aren't criminals are apparently
Alike. Yeah, those. I just noticed that too.
okay.
I didn't catch that one. I was proofreading.
Okay, communities and cities all around time continuum. That doesn't work. All through the time continuum. Let's see here. Let's see. Possible criminal activity in a fraction of the time it would normally take. And then I added, well, you had considering citizens would be alert. Taking into account that citizens would be alert, I thought was a better way to do it. Okay, and here we've got one of the big problems, which I'd like some of you folks to tell me what the problem is here with the amount of individuals. It's what?
I'm reading the sentence.
Amount of individuals. There's something wrong with that, right? Can you tell me what's wrong with that?
I'm not exactly sure, but it kind of sounds a little off.
It is off.
Mhm.
We talk about an amount of water,
Yeah,
an amount of
humans
oil, amount of
aren't
laughter,
objects.
but we don't talk about amount of individuals.
Amount
It's
of
a number
people.
of individuals.
Yeah, number.
And the difference is, what is the difference between talking about much and many? The term that I've used before and we talk about in the book is mass noun and count noun.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You've got a mass noun. This is something you can use in bulk. You can say so many pounds of it, there's a lot of it. But as soon as you start counting them, we have to say how many there are instead of how much. And that's the problem we have, where we don't use an amount of individuals. Okay, and then we talk about the person on the receiving end of the crime. I suggested perhaps we use the word victim. All these potential very put into, okay. And even destroy any criminal activity in the very premature early stage. I should have said something about that. Premature early stage, that's somewhat
yeah.
pleonastic,
Yeah.
redundant.
Yeah,
Repetitively redundant.
Yes, repetitively.
Okay. And then uneventful. And of course, uneventful, it can be a one word, but I didn't think it made sense at all in that context. I don't understand what you meant by uneventful.
Remember, even I honestly thought I put it just one word. I don't know, my phone's weird sometimes. It just
Yeah, but I mean, either way, we're worrying about some terrible thing maturing into something uneventful.
yes.
I just didn't know what was meant by that. So my suggestion here is, wonderful, you put a lot of thought into this. One project, resubmit edited version for further credit. See if you can patch up and fix those things we discussed. Okay, let's see. One of the questions I had here also is this something that one would want to discuss or debate? One of the big assumptions here, and again, I throw it in as devil's advocate here, your premise assumes that crime and disasters are a major threat that merits dictatorial manipulation from above. This is certainly what states often use to justify their actions. If states want to garner more power and reduce the power of the people, usually it's done by citing the dangers out there, criminals and horrible things that might happen, which in many cases, if you look at the actual statistics, are minor and inconsequential. Perhaps one should ask whether all states would use social manipulation for the good of the people. One example of such manipulation is the Reichstag fire, and I gave you a link in there. Did anybody take that and look at it?
I did not do that.
Okay. Also, and false flag tactics. And we see a good deal of that being used and even being planned. That is, for example, executing a terrorism act and then blaming it on somebody else in order to justify retribution.
Oh, I can give an example of that.
Please.
The movie that's coming out, Benghazi, I'm going to see it Saturday. I remember after the terrorist attack happened, so someone put out this cartoon video of, just making fun of terrorism, radical Islam, whatever. And so then Benghazi happened, and then at the memorial for the family members who lost loved ones, what Hillary did, she pulled the false flag and she blamed it on a cartoon video that had absolutely nothing to do with the attack. The people at Benghazi have requested for backup over 400 times in a time span of about 200 days.
We're talking Libya here and the,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, this is one example, though.
That's
Our just about everywhere in the world, you're going to find that news tends to be sifted, and
Yeah, most definitely.
and we think about ours as perhaps being a little better than it is elsewhere. When you look at it in perspective, it's really not, or at least I won't necessarily draw that conclusion. I'll leave it up to you, but I recommend look at news from many different sources and come to your own conclusions about that. And you'll find that pretty much all countries do pretty much the same kind of thing. In one way or another, the news is slanted or skewed or spun, if you like. And so it's hard to tell what's going on in the world. But indeed, false flag, in fact, is one of the tactics that was laid out and recommended and defined and codified by the GCHQ as discovered after the Snowden leaks, that pretending to post something on websites, for example, pretending to be somebody else was one of the tactics that was being studied by the GCHQ. Right, it's their equivalent to the NSA. So anyway, one of the questions here is this something that one would like to look at and study a little bit, studying a little bit of international journalism, perhaps, to see what is said about different things. There are a lot of different excellent sources of journalism. Al Jazeera isn't bad. Deutsche Welle, the German one, Le Monde in France, the Svenska Dagbladet in Sweden. There are a lot of different newspapers around the world which have English versions that will give you a different perspective on things. So we could think about that and play around with it. Okay, let's go on to this other. Well, let's just look at the mechanics here. Be careful to make long, complex, parallel constructions correct. You have to make sure that they are correct and are in fact parallel. You did a pretty good job on most of them.
Thank you.
Be sure all pronouns have a clear antecedent. That was a problem. Remind me to talk about the subjunctive voice. We still need to do that. I'll have to find where it is in the book and ask you to look at that. And previous things in the past is redundant. That was in there somewhere or other. So you see the problem with that. And again, it's pleonastic is the word. Watch for split infinitives. I'm not going to tell you not to use them. In fact, we're going to come across something later on today in which using a split infinitive may indeed be the right thing to do, but I want you to be aware that you're doing it and why you're doing it. And check for correct collocations. Anybody have any idea what a collocation is? Did you read chapter 1 in the book? Collocation is, sorry, go ahead.
I'm trying to think. Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, it's not a very common word, but it's a very important one, which we all, the concept of collocations, we're all expert on because we're used to language. We use words in combination reflexively and understand them that way. But collocation is the co-location of words, very often, for example, a verb and a preposition. So to take on, to take up, to take over, these are combinations of words that are used together to mean a specific thing. And you have to avoid using those which really don't mean anything. And how do you find which ones are most common and which ones have a significance, have the significance you're looking for? You put quotes around them and Google it. And look at the count. Okay, this is all in the first chapter. You all read that first chapter, right? Yeah, in order to find out whether it's to be enamored of or to be enamored with. Just put it in quotes, Google it, and look at the count and
Take
see
home.
which one is the most common. You'll
Take
find
home.
both of those will score fairly high. But Shakespeare used to be enamored of, and so I prefer it. Okay, let's go on to the next one here. And here we have a discussion of GMOs. Now, strictly speaking, what we should do at the very beginning of something like this, if we're going to talk about GMOs, is we say genetically modified organisms, parenthesis, GMO, and then we can use GMO for the rest of the thing. But in this case, although the genetic engineering is mentioned, we never actually expand the acronym. And we should start out by expanding the expansion of the acronym, mentioning the acronym, and then we can use it from that point on. Through genetic engineering, scientists have the ability to clone animals, make cats that glow in the dark, and even make pesticide-resistant plants. Okay, notice that I've changed things here. I found that at least putting my comments in italics makes them stand out a little bit, even if I can't do it in red and boldface. And we have to make this plural, so I had to add the S in here. Have ability to just doesn't work. We have to have the ability. And the old rule is, of course, if you have a singular noun, it has to take an article, either a or the, unless it's one of the vast number of exceptions. I've got a list of those exceptions, but it's not exhaustive in the book. And so this just falls into that category. We need to have the article there. I mention the Oxford comma just because it's important for you to know that you're using it if you're going to use it. Most people don't anymore. Okay, important development for mankind. Now, he's laid out the first paragraph here, but ends the paragraph at this point. Some people view this ability to change the characteristics of organisms as an important development for mankind. Others view this ability as gross manipulation of nature. You don't want to put a paragraph between those two sentences. I mean, they fit together. They're talking about each other. And so I take it out there. But if you put it in here, it works just fine. After we say others view this ability as a gross manipulation of nature, paragraph break. Genetically engineered crops, we're off onto a different topic here altogether. Paragraph break there makes a lot of sense. Okay, and whenever you see the little exclamation point, which I'm not sure you can see very well nor interpret, but there it is, that means something's been done right. The world population is estimated at 2.7 billion people. When?
Why?
I don't think that's.
That's
way-
70s or something.
That's way off, yeah. Many of these people, now you could go ahead and say many of these people, that's not wrong, but you just use the word people. We shouldn't immediately use it again. It makes sense there just to say many of whom. For one thing, that lets your reader know that you know how to use whom properly. Are starving and live in poor, impoverished countries. Now, what's the problem with poor, impoverished? We could add poor, impoverished, penurious if you'd like, but okay, what is the word I have in there? I've used that word 3 times, I think, already this afternoon.
I can't really see it.
I'm sorry, that makes it very hard, doesn't it? Pleonasm. A pleonasm is a redundancy in construction. Yeah. So you don't want to say poor and impoverished as well. It's just too much. Clean living habits, food, and clean water is a scarcity. Now I put in are because we have a plural subject here, but you could regard food and clean water as a unit of some sort, and you say this is, that you could make a case for using the verb differently. Okay, now, down here we have genetically modified organisms. So I'm sorry, indeed, if this is the first time it's being used or referred to, it's being done correctly. That's fine. Argue that agricultural companies have no intention of feeding billions of people, but rather they intend to make billions of dollars. I think that they intend to makes this clear rather than simply saying, but rather make billions of dollars and protect their patented seeds. Another argument against GMOs is that the side effects of this organism are this organism, of course, there are many organisms involved, are unknown once ingested or once ingested by animals. And indeed, if you're eating animals that have ingested genetically modified organisms or other toxins of one sort or another, it tends to be concentrated more than if you were eating the food itself. What crops tend to be genetically modified?
Corn.
Lettuce,
Wheat.
Strawberries.
I know corn for a
Corn,
fact.
definitely.
Wheat.
Beans, certainly soybeans. Wheat may well be. I wasn't aware of that. I think a lot of things they haven't figured out how to do it yet, and I think strawberries fit into that, but I may be wrong. But indeed, there's a good deal of question about how valid it is. The arguments, of course, are that I'm sorry, we're getting on subject matter here instead of onto structure. But I think Azariah does a nice job of stating both sides of the case. He doesn't really take one side or the other. Okay, many people have different opinions. I like to avoid the word people if we can. I've mentioned that before. People tends to be overused. We can talk about citizens or constituents or all kinds of other different ways of talking about people. Have different opinions is a very commonplace way to say something. I think one way to avoid the many people is simply to say opinions differ greatly. That way we don't even have to say anything about the people whose opinions they are, because we're not making any kind of specific claim about this group of people or that group of people. We're just saying people, which is a sort of a pointless thing to do. So why don't we just leave it out and say opinions differ greatly on genetically modified food. Now notice that I changed the here and took it out, whereas I put one in up above. The rule is that third person singular nouns should take an article except for the exceptions. And one of the big exceptions is mass nouns. We just talked about mass nouns. We talk about how much water, how much rice, how much wheat, but how many people. If we're talking about a mass noun, in this case food, we talk about how much food, then we don't use and we don't need the article. Okay. However, the majority of people in the Western United States and the world are against GMOs. And the countries like doesn't really add anything to this sentence. In fact, it confuses things. If we're saying that Australia, China, France, and Mexico have banned it, what are the countries like these countries that have banned it? That doesn't really tell us anything. So let's just say Australia, China, France, and Mexico, and others, or something like that, have banned genetically modified food. Even with bans on genetically modified foods in other countries, the use of GMOs continually grows in the United States. Any comments on this one?
It's a very interesting topic. I didn't know it was banned in other countries.
Yeah, I think it's banned in about 36 countries or so.
Yeah, most of the
those-
European Union, I
Almost
believe,
a
is as opposed to, but it's very difficult to ban because it's the genetically modified plants tend to spread too, and you get these influences.
Yeah.
So, an interesting question. One of the questions that I feel like asking here, we're talking in here about the motivations of the companies involved, Monsanto being the one who's always cited. What are the motivations of the companies? Well, the
Money.
motivations of the companies are defined.
Yeah.
They have stockholders. Those stockholders are expecting them to increase the bottom line. The company doesn't really have the discretion to make decisions that would damage the bottom line for its stockholders. If you have incentives all lined up on one side of an issue, it's very difficult to push it in another direction. Anyway, very interesting. And again here, let's see, choose logical semantic breaks for your paragraph breaks. He will get by as long as somebody doesn't buy something from him. Okay. Choose logical semantic breaks. What does semantic mean? Important word for you folks to know.
Is it like
Well, it's not really like anything. It is something.
a system or not in the middle of something else?
Well, semantic doesn't necessarily mean that. You're getting the gist of the sentence.
Yeah.
But semantic means meaning. What is the meaning? What is the content payload of your sentence?
You were literally right. It means something.
I'm sorry?
You were literally right. It means something.
Well, it does.
Yeah.
Okay.
It means meaning. Get it?
It means meaning. Yes, yes. And in fact, it's often used in contrast to syntactic. Now, well, what is the difference between semantics and syntax? Anybody have any concept?
I should know this.
Put this one down. This is worth remembering. Semantic is the meaning of what you're saying. Syntax is the structure of the language you're using to say it. So when you make a grammatical error, it's a syntactic error. When you make an error about how many billion people live on the earth, that's a semantic error. Okay? So when we're looking through something like this, we end up sort of looking at the semantics and also at the syntax at the same time. The syntax is just a matter of getting your grammar, getting your structure, getting your style put together properly. Whereas semantics is, are you actually saying something that makes any sense? Okay, so semantic breaks, in other words, don't make your paragraph breaks. A paragraph is a syntactic device, but make it reflect the semantic break. Make it reflect a break between subject matters in the content. Avoid redundancy, poor impoverished people, for example, and watch for subject-verb agreement. Okay, Ezra, very nice, and let's look for more of those. Actually, there's not a lot that in here that could be repaired. If you want to go through and resubmit it, that's fine, and you'll get another project credit for that. Okay, I'd like to take us back to now. Have I got everybody's submitted material? Is this a good time for you, Nicholas?
Yes.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Most definitely.
Would you like? Let's see. I can turn this so it's
You
not.
want to find it or? Oh,
Oh.
maybe.
Oh, you're going to do a recitation from something, but you don't have it handy.
No, I have it handy.
I think he just wants you to follow along.
Mhm.
or
Well,
see
no,
if-
I'm saying I don't, because how will you know if I'm reciting it correctly? If
Okay, very good point, because I don't know the thing itself. I'll see if I can find it. I just don't want to waste time for that.
Oh.
Oh, okay. If you'd like, you can hand it to me.
it
Okay.
might lock, so I'll try and do it quickly. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning and her name. Mother of exiles, from her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-dripped harbor that twin cities frame. Keep ancient lands your storied pomp, cries she. Give me with silent lips, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
That's beautiful. Very nicely chosen and very nicely delivered.
Thank you.
Excellent. Let's discuss that a little bit. We're talking here about one of the wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes that straddled a harbor, wasn't it? I'm not sure exactly where that harbor was.
It was on the island of Cyprus, I believe.
Very good, very good. In the Mediterranean, in the Eastern Mediterranean, and comparing it to what other major landmark?
To the Statue of Liberty.
Exactly.
I know.
And
It's on a plaque that's at the feet of the Statue of Liberty.
exactly, your huddled masses. That beautiful text in there, which I don't remember well enough to recite, but indeed, what do you draw from this poem, Nicholas? Why did you choose it, and why do you think it's important?
I memorized it once ago, but then I decided to revive it. It fits in with what we're talking about, patriotic poems by these people, Abraham Lincoln,
Mhm.
and in this case, it would be
Lazarus.
Emma Lazarus.
Mhm.
Just fits in.
Yeah, it certainly seems particularly apt right now. But can I see the poem for just a second and read a little chunk of the end of it there? Would you say that these lines are particularly
And I think it's
appropriate right now?
I think it's talking about just at that time giving people to America, accepting new people, new ideas. Well, back then, America used to be called nicknamed the land of opportunity.
Mhm.
So that poem, which
Well,
was made
indeed,
in that
and
time.
this I just wanted to quote the end of it, which is wonderful. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses learning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shores, send these the homeless tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. This isn't exactly what they're saying in Europe right now, is it? Okay. In fact, there have been times in the past that a number of countries have actively encouraged immigration. Australia certainly did for some time. And the U.S. has accepted immigrants over the years. But we're sort of in a different state right now, and we've got this immigration problem taking place. That's really affecting all of Europe very, very. And we certainly changed our tune. It still says that on the Statue of Liberty, but we're not as welcoming as we used to be.
Well, for good reason too.
Yes. Yeah, but one of the important things there that you said, I thought was very important. That is, letting in new ideas, new concepts. I think those are important. But one of the things we don't do a very good job of in this country is learning about them, understanding where they're coming from, the languages they speak, the cultures they come from, the belief systems they adhere to. We are abysmally ignorant of so much of the rest of the world. Partly, I suppose, because we've been at the top of the world for quite a long time. How long are we going to be there?
Well, we're not at the top anymore. There's a country that's beating us, but in trading, well, in general, for just a country's strength, I think USA from the recent poll is now rated 5th in the world, behind powerful countries in Europe.
Well, there's so many different parameters we could use to judge that by. That's the difficulty. Are we talking about gross national product? Are we talking about debt burden?
I assume it's all that stuff factored in: economy, military strength.
Well, the military strength, I think there's no question we're way ahead of most of the world there because we outspend all of the rest of the world.
Do you know who's ahead of us?
I don't think anyone is.
Take a guess.
Well, I mean,
Think hard.
okay. Well, I mean, the size of the military wise, probably China. Just 'cause
Well,
they have
military
such a large population.
strength. Who's ahead of us?
I honestly think the U.S. probably has the best, one of the best technologies and training
in my
out of
opinion,
any other
too.
country.
Israel is number one.
Well,
Not with
Well-
size.
Oh yeah, I mean, besides
Military
it's probably
strength,
very large, but they probably aren't really.
because-
I think that you're
This-
counting apples and oranges.
The surrounding countries all teamed up against Israel, and then Israel had to strengthen their army to compensate. Then the surrounding countries also strengthened their armies, tactics, technology, everything. Then Israel had to strengthen theirs again, and that went back and forth for a long time since Israel was established.
Yeah, I mean, Israel does have a very powerful military, considering the fact that they're a really small country, but
And taken on almost all of the just the neighboring countries.
yeah, but I mean, I'm not quite sure if I would say that they're the very best. In fact, I'm not quite sure if I would necessarily go that far to say that about any country, really.
Yeah, that is true.
So, yeah.
No, it's one has to realize, of course, that in the arc of history, all civilizations come and go, and we have to look at ours and realize we're at that point. We look at the Roman civilizations and the Charlemagne and the British Empire. They all have their conclusions. There seems to be this assumption on the part of people making major decisions that it's going to stay this way forever. Come right out and say so. And you have to stop and ask yourself, does this make any sense at all? What kind of people do we have running things? All right, let's go back to our agenda here. Number of things were requested, and I've come up with some of them, and I have some others that I want to look at as well. We were looking at the error-riddled writing of the Hunger Games, which I don't want to dwell on excessively, but it was a nice little article written by somebody who has some copywriting skill, who's able to see the flaws that obviously got by whatever editor was being used in that process. And that's one of the problems. So a lot of writers aren't capable of editing their own material, and a lot of publishers don't really edit material anymore. And in fact, they don't really publicize material anymore. They expect the writers to do that work themselves through social media. And so the world of publishing, the world of books is changing. rapidly when you find that, with the exception of major writers who already have a track record, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to go to a publisher and get 10% and have to do all of your own publicity anyway, or to self-publish and get 70% and still have to do your own publicity. It's a different world and a different publishing environment. So I don't know how I got into that, but the fact is you get poor quality, I think, in a lot of books that come out, and it doesn't seem to matter. Personally, I think that is a real black mark
That's why
for the America and our school system, is that people don't care if something is just abysmally written.
that's why you have to stick with the classics.
Classics are important. Yeah, classics are extremely important. And why are they classics? This is a big question to ask. One has a tendency to assume that things from the past were so much better than they are now, which isn't true at all.
Well, in literature, the quality of writing, because everybody had great education back then.
It's true that education varied substantially, and it's dreadful right now.
Yes.
But my point is not so much that as the fact that classics do tend to look as though they're better than what's taking place now, because that which was produced in the past that wasn't worth keeping wasn't kept. In other words, we have sifted material, we have selected, sorted material from the past, and the stuff that wasn't worth anything just has disappeared on us. And now we look around at the amount of material that's been produced since the beginning of the 20th century, enormous quantities of stuff. And there's no sifting that time really hasn't done its job on it yet. And because it's so much easier to store material now, probably an awful lot of that stuff will be stored for a long period of time. So we have to be discriminating. We have to do our own discriminating. We have to look around and see what out there really does deserve to last. What is it that really deserves to be studied?
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate your thoughts on that. What great works, and there are great works taking place right now throughout the recent history, but they're harder to find because they're hidden among all of the dreck and dross that you have, which so many people can't distinguish. Again, well, I will save that for another time. But I think Hunger Games is an example of this. Popular, but
do you think that the more marketed and popular a book is, the more mistakes it can have?
The more mistakes it can,
yeah, because
it can survive with.
I'm just seeing a pattern because the Hunger Games. Almost everyone in schools across the country and read that book, and it was so well known,
accepted and appreciated and touted. Yes, it is a problem. But I think it reflects on the fact that a vast majority of American readers can't tell the difference between good writing and bad. You look at Harry Potter, however, it's well written. I mean, she knew how to write. I don't think it comes up to the level of so many other writers, Tolkien, for example. But it's good. But it's clear that we've lost our ability to discriminate because our schools just don't teach us anything about what good writing is. Here is a wonderful writer. I thought it might be nice to throw a little of him at you. George Bernard Shaw. You may not know much about him. He's an Irishman. He is one of a few writers whose name has become an adjective. Shakespeare, of course, we talk about Shakespearean drama. With Shaw, we talk about Shavian drama. He's actually got his own adjective. And he wrote a number of plays, one of which I'm sure you're familiar with, at least tangentially. And that one's called Pygmalion. And I thought I'd throw it out there. Is that any of you ever heard of it? Okay. It was made into a musical in the 60s called My Fair Lady. You heard of that one?
Yeah.
Been some time ago.
Yeah.
The musical was wonderful. It was on stage for a long time before, as a musical, before it was made into the film. But the original play by Bernard Shaw, I think, might be worth looking at. And I won't inflict it upon you if it doesn't inspire, but let me explain why I think it's of a certain amount of value. It takes place in England, which gives one a little bit of context, and sort of important context, which we in this country miss and really don't evaluate particularly well. And that is the extent to which your language defines who you are. Now, if someone enters a room and speaks a couple of sentences, there's an awful lot you can tell about them. And you don't have to be a Sherlock Holmes to be able to do it. You can usually tell where they came from. You can tell something about how much education they've had. You can tell a great deal from the way they pronounce things, the words that they choose. However, in this country, it's become much more vitiated. It's become diluted and rather difficult to tell because our educational system is so bad. It's hard to tell the difference between the speech or the writing of an educated person and the speech or writing of a person whose input has been primarily popular culture. Because popular culture has developed a set of language usage devices, and they've permeated everything. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Language evolves, and that's expected. Unfortunately, when language evolves in a direction that eventually reduces one's vocabulary, one's commonly used vocabulary, down to just a few hundred words, realize that we have lost a lot of expressive capability that way. And I feel that American English has done that to some extent. Now, what this story is about is the very distinct languages that distinguished people in different classes within the English system. And of course, the English system has always been rather dreadful in that respect, still is, although language is less a part of it now than it used to be. But the class system is very strict there. You've got different levels of education, and how one used language was an immediate reflection of a number of things, of one's social status, of one's education, of one's location, one's geographical origins. Mm-hmm. And those are still true to a large extent. You can tell where somebody's from. You can tell whether somebody's from the South or from Canada or from. We're sort of mixed up with the rest of the country. But in England, this was very, very distinct. That there wasn't a great deal of movement from one place to another. If you were born in one particular place, it's as Orwell said, all Englishmen are branded on the tongue. In other words, as soon as you open your mouth, everybody knows exactly where you're from. However, there was an effort to solve this, or at least to come up with a centralized standard at which nobody would make fun and nobody would be offended by. And this developed during the 19th century and became a sort of a standard English that did not, it tended to be used by the educated classes. And so it did define a class structure in that respect, but it didn't say anything about one's location of origin. People from Manchester, people from Scotland and Cornwall would all go to a good school and learn how to speak. And as a result, they didn't speak the way their parents did necessarily. They learned the accent that they were taught as they went through school. And that's the basis of this concept. Shaw based his Henry Higgins character on an actual person who was able to listen to somebody and immediately determine exactly where they came from and what their background was. It's still a good skill to acquire. And we can learn something about how to do that even in the mishmash we use here as language. And so he created this Henry Higgins character. And the story is about a young lady who comes from Drury Lane, which is a part of London that's not particularly opulent. And I'm sorry, Lisson Grove is where she comes from. Drury Lane is where the theaters are. And a bet goes on as to whether he would be able to, within a certain period of time, teach her how to speak and to pass her off as a duchess. That's the premise of the story. The musical is wonderful. The play, however, is the structural background of it, and it involves looking at language in general terms, but also in specific terms. As he said, he can place anyone anywhere in England within 2 miles, in London within 2 streets. And that was probably true at one point. So that's why I thought this would be an interesting one to look at, because whether you're aware of it or not, whenever you speak to someone, you do make an impression. And that's also true of writing. Your choice of words, your use of language, your avoidance or use of non-errors in your writing is going to say a great deal to the person who is reading your material or listening to you speak. And the question is, do you want to be in control of what they see? And that's my suggestion, is that, well, one should understand how those things work. You may decide that it is, under certain circumstances, a good idea to lower the tone of your language, lower the formality. It might indeed be very appropriate if you find yourself in prison or something. But you want to be able to choose yourself where you want it to be and how you want it to be perceived by others. Okay, anybody interested in looking at this? It's a play, not a book. And we have one big disadvantage in looking at it, and that is we haven't got a girl in the class.
That's true.
All right, doesn't sound like there's an enormous amount of... okay, I wanted to look at poetic scansion also. Shall I assume that we're not going to look at Bernard Shaw?
I'm fine with that. I'm intrigued.
Let's look at a little bit of it, and we can still change before we go through the whole thing. Let's read the first act. I forget how the acts are divided in there, but let's read the first act. Okay, poetic scansion, the use of rhythm and meter in poetry. We talked about poetry, and Nicholas has given us another wonderful example of poetry, which I would like to post on the site. When we get a chance, I'll do that. understanding the words for different poetic devices is not that important. It's perfectly possible to be able to write poetry without knowing what a molossus is, for example, or anapestic or something. However, and this is something I'd like to put out there and see what you folks think. Learning how to learn, learning how to memorize is extremely useful. It's not education, but boy, it'll get you through school.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can take a list of 20 terms and get them down on your way to class in the morning, that is a skill that's really worth having. And so why don't we look at some of these terms, and I'm going to ask you if you feel they're worthwhile. Let's go ahead and memorize them. I wanted to give you this one here, the Ode Less Traveled. The Ode Less Traveled, I own it in hardbound and have read it a number of times. It's brilliantly done. It's a treatise on how to write poetry, not just how to analyze it and how it's put together, but here's an exercise. Sit down and do it. Try to get your lines to fit the meter properly, to understand how rhyming works. And so this is a brilliant book on how to write poetry, if anybody's interested. Now, whenever there is a really good book anywhere in the world that people are interested in, somebody has put it out online.
That's true. They're everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. And in this case, somebody has put it up in Russia, and I put in a link to it here. Now, I feel justified in doing that doubly because also Fry's philosophy of open access to things is quite different than a lot of people, and certainly differs from that of most publishers. He's perfectly happy to have his material spread around the world where it can make a little more, provide value to people. One of the problems with Fry's material in general, I would probably give you more of it, he is a word master, does absolutely wonderful things with language. His unscripted speech is superb, but it's a minefield for teachers because he can't keep his mind out of the gutter. His predilections and preoccupations are just likely to cause anybody trouble. But of course, if you can describe it with the right words, you can say all kinds of dirty things without getting in trouble. But there isn't that much in here. He does a fairly decent job, although he naturally wanders off into micturation more often than one would like. I'm not necessarily going to assign it to you. I leave this entirely up to you. But as I said, I bought the hard copy and found it absolutely essential, absolutely wonderful resource. Okay. Nicholas gave us a recitation of the Gettysburg Address. I put here Garrison Keillor's recitation in case you'd like to listen to that. He does a good job of it too, and he has music in the background of it. Have all of you listened to Elegy in Country Churchyard?
No.
Okay, well that was up there last week, and I recommend it. It's one of the great poems of the English language. It really is. And we encountered it simply because it was mentioned tangentially in when we were discussing Lincoln, because it's one of his favorite poems. And in the bookshelf, which I went over last week, a number of his poems were mentioned in there because, of course, they would be in his bookshelf. So, shall we look at this one a little bit more?
Mhm.
Let's take a quick look now. I pushed the wrong button there. That's all right. All right, this is a fairly decent recitation of it, but it's unnecessary because if we go down
Oh
further,
yeah, I've seen this.
you did get a chance to
Yeah,
listen
yeah.
to it? Good.
The name didn't ring a bell, but
Yeah,
now I-
this commentary on it by Belinda Jack of I forget which university. It's interesting. There's nothing really very new about it. She does the kind of thing that English teachers tend to do. That is, wow and wonderful at this little device and this little device. Which is understandable. I mean, it's beauty, but how do you reflect the beauty of something? Well, there isn't really a good way to do it. You can count the P's and Q's, you can count the adjectives. I mean, it's not going to tell you why the thing is beautiful, but indeed, it is an absolutely stunning piece of work here.
definitely, in my opinion.
The first part here is wonderful. How he describes being there and describes the countryside with the herd of cattle lowing. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight, and all the air solemn stillness holds, save where the beetle wheels his droning flight, and drowsy tinklings lull the distant folds. Absolutely amazing. Save that from yonder ivy mantled tower, the moping owl does to the moon complain, of such as wandering near her secret bower molest her ancient solitary reign. All right, we've got the tower, we've got the owl, we've got the ploughman plodding his way home, and the drowsy tinklings of the bells after the knell of the curfew bell, which is would ring at a certain time of day. And now we get to the churchyard. Beneath those rugged elms, the yew trees shade, where heaves the turf in many a mouldering heap, each in his narrow cell forever laid, the rude forefathers of the hamlet sleep. The breezy call of incense breathing morn, the swallow twittering from the straw-built shed, the cock's shrill clarion and the echoing horn no more shall rouse them from their lowly bed. And now he goes on to explain what their life is like. And no more for them the blazing hearth shall burn, no busy housewife ply her evening care, no children run to list their shy eyes return, or climb his knees the envied kiss to share. And I think I went through a good deal of this before, but I listened to it again. It's really brilliantly done. And here, of course, is the line that Lincoln quoted when he said, "My life is indeed summed up in that line, the short and simple annals of the poor." And then the other line that was used in the poem. Somehow this is an amazing one here. But knowledge, to their eyes, her ample page, rich with the spoils of time, did ne'er unroll. Chill penury repressed their noble rage, and froze the genial current of the soul. This is language used in true mastery. Think about it. Knowledge is the subject of the sentence here. Knowledge was never available to them. Her ample page, rich with the spoils of time, did ne'er unroll. They never got a chance to see what history was all about, what knowledge had been developed. Of course, here we're talking 18th century. That's a lot less knowledge than we have at our disposal right now. Chill penury. I think I defined that for you before. Do you remember what it? I mean, I used the word today.
I remember.
We talk about poor poverty.
Oh, repetition.
Yeah.
Repetition, redundancy.
Exactly. Penury simply means poverty. It's another word for it. It's got a nice adjectival form, penurious. And froze the genial current of the soul. I have something else I want to get to today, but please go through this, and then if anybody's interested in reciting some of it or has any questions on it, I'd be glad to come in here and look at it again. He wrote very little because he didn't like criticism. He wanted to make sure he got it right.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, he was a Cambridge professor and scholar, and knew how to throw his words around. Okay, now one of the other things that I would, okay. The question is, should we go in and look at poetic devices here? Let me show you something else first, and then we'll see if we can get to poetic scansion. Let's bring that one up, though. This is just a 2-page thing. Very simple stuff. Let's look at the basic 2 types of metric feet that you're going to encounter more than anything else are the iamb and the trochee. The iamb, or the adjectival form, is iambic, and that is da-da, 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 da-da. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day, the lowing herd rides slowly o'er the lea. Trochee, it's the other way around. The first syllable is emphasized and not the second one. So double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. A lot of Longfellow, and he manages to sustain it a long time. Trochees are harder to use than iambs. And then those are the 2 that are used almost universally in traditional poetry, in classical poetry. And they, of course, there are only 2 if you're talking about feet that consist of 2 syllables. It's da-da or da-da, one or the other. But when we get 3, they become much more complex, but 3 is not used that commonly. You don't find these triple meter very often. Where you will find it, for example, Lewis Carroll enjoyed it a great deal, and his Hunting of the Snark is a wonderful example of that. And for example, The Walrus and the Carpenter. Are you familiar with that? The walrus and the carpenter were walking near at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. Da 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 da. Now, just a second. That doesn't really do it. I'm sorry. The Huntington Snark definitely does, but no, that one doesn't. That one is iambic heptameter, and it doesn't follow that pattern. The one that does, of course, that you're all familiar with is "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" and "All Through the House." Also, Olive Seuss does that.
Yeah.
You also find it used in limericks and so forth. But then that's not as common. And that would either be the anapest or the dactyl most of the time. And occasionally you'll get the amphibrach popping up there. Anapest is da-da-da, da-da-da, and dactyl is da-da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da. The amphibrach is a nice one. It's ta-da-da, ta-da-da, ta-da-da. And I wrote something in that specifically because at one point I had two amphibrachtic student names in the class. And Fiona, Brianna, and Heather come practice their language together. But when the winds blow, they have to forego their trip due to inclement weather, which is when the winds blew and we had to cancel class. So if you've got something like that, where you have one word that has da-da-da in it, then you have to recognize it's not anapestic or dactylic. It actually is amphibrachtic with the emphasis in the middle. Okay, you got all of those down.
Yeah.
These are sort of stupid. Spondee is two heavy syllables right next to each other. In a deep wood stood a tall man with a sharp knife. Dum, bum, bum, bum. And Pyrrhic, this is simply an extra unstressed syllable, and I don't think it really deserves to have a name or play around with that. There are others in here. If you read Fry's book, you'll find there are others that are useful. The three syllables emphasized together is the molasses, since I've mentioned that before. To sit in solemn silence in a dull, dark dock, in a pestilential prison with a lifelong lock, awaiting the sensation of a short, sharp shot from a cheap and jiffy chopper on a big black book. Have you heard that one? Okay, that's a molasses. Anyway, please go ahead and look at this. I want to take this on something else before we run out of time. The things that we really need to understand is the names of the different kinds of feet, which is what we were just looking at, how many feet are in each line, and that's simple, straightforward stuff. Monometers 1, dimeters 2, trimeters 3, tetrameter is 4, pentameter, hexameter, heptameter, and octameter. Oh, you got those all down, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the curfew tolls Vanilla parting day that we have a little bit of again, the walrus and the carpenter. And the anapestic at the far end of town where the brickle grass grows. This is from the Lorax, right? Okay, so go ahead and study that page.
You have some bold typing in there, some bold print.
Yes, there is bold in there. But for some reason, when I take your posting and paste it in, I'm unable to bold things within it. So there's some sort of enclosing tag that's preventing it from happening. I'm not sure how that works out to analyze the HTML and see if I can figure it out. I might end up just taking your material, stripping all of the HTML out of it and pasting it in as pure text. And then it might work. I'm not sure. Okay, now there was something here I wanted to show you. I've assigned this before. This is part of this listing of essays that won awards or got their writers into Ivy League schools. And I really look at this and I can see exactly why they won, or at least I feel I can. I don't have any way to prove my conclusions, but let me state my conclusions and you folks give me your evaluation of them. When I look at a line like this is a person who's gone to an honors program, a 6-week intensive college-like experience, and then it says, it was the best thing that has ever happened to me. That doesn't win you any prizes, saying a simple sentence like, that is the best thing that ever happened to me. This next sentence does. The next sentence is, that is something of a hackneyed phrase. People cheapen the extremes of language by constantly using superlatives for everyday occurrences, making it harder and harder to actually describe the few subtle and transcendent moments of life. If you can write like that, you will startle that reader.
Mhm.
Now, this brings the question, how do I do that? How do I write like that? Well, one of the best ways to do it is to read stuff that's really beautifully done. And that's my intent, is to provide you with plenty of that. But then the next caveat is never use anybody else's words. Used to be you might occasionally get away with that. If you found something really good that this reader wasn't familiar with, but nowadays with a search engine, that doesn't, you can't do that. And so the answer to that one is you can do better, come up with something better. And that you can do by gaining a real intuitive understanding of the process of writing and the process of putting these together. But you can cheat a little bit. You can cheat by putting something together in advance with finely crafted and with superbly chosen vocabulary, and try to construct something. You make sure that it's nothing that exists anywhere else in the world, and you can do that by searching to find out whether it's out there. And make yourself a paragraph like that, a couple of sentences, or if you can, put a couple of sentences together like that that are sort of generic in the sense that you could plug them into anything. If you've got two concepts, for example, we're talking about GMOs and non-GMOs or something like that, you can put together something that contrasts the two, saying, although for most purposes the ineluctable conclusion one must draw from the following would belie the results. I'm making this up as I'm going along. Would belie the results that one gets by choosing the alternative. Now, that's not necessarily a wonderful one, but it's something you can plug into just about anything where you have two contrasting elements. Make your own up. Spend hours on it. Spend days on it. Really define the words you want. Have it at your disposal. Next time you even if you sit down for an SAT exam under test conditions and they give you the subject, you can figure out a way to weave that in and plug it in. Make sure it's yours. Make sure it's unique. And it will startle the reader. Now, for SAT exams, it really doesn't apply because SAT exams are basically a word count. But, and that's in our classroom, by the way, but please read that thing on the SAT reading if you'd like.
What's with all the capitals and little
I don't know exactly what happens to it there, but this, of course, is an online copy that somebody posted, and what happened with the uppercase and lowercase, I have no idea. No idea at all.
Maybe that was one of the best things that had ever happened to that person who wrote that. I'm just curious. No,
Just a copy paste.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that became distorted there. A couple of other things here I wanted to mention, though. One of them is, of course, we have some things in this that are absolutely wonderful. The few subtle and transcendent moments of life, extremes of language by consistently using superlatives for everyday occurrences, making it harder to actually describe the few subtle and transcendent moments of life. If you look up, for example, if I were to search subtle and transcendent moments of life.
in quotes, right?
In quotes.
Okay.
I'm not sure what you get. I haven't done it. It's possible you will get a number of, it's hard to find something nobody's used, but I don't think you'll find a lot of it out there. And if you do search that, you won't find that it's been drawn from the same paragraph as this. That's the important thing. You want to make sure that if somebody searches your material, you may have drawn on somebody else's phrase, but you didn't draw on somebody else's sentence. You're using the phrase separately. Notice there's an error in here. What's the error? split infinitive, to actually describe. Now, it's not a big error, and it's not universally regarded as an error, so it's an ideal error to use if you need an error.
Uh-huh.
Let's look at another one down here. I think I put another one here, and this will also perhaps lead us into something we might like to look at. The commentary on these things, by the way, is excellent to read. It's different. I mean, different evaluators are going to evaluate things differently, and so it's a little hard to know the universal points you need to look at. And notice we have the same uppercase, lowercase weirdness at the top here. Now notice this line here. Clearly an oxymoron, but profoundly effective. Notice that's a sentence fragment. That's okay. Is that all right? It's an error, but it's beautifully done. Anybody who understands clearly profoundly effective and oxymoron, this will startle someone if you have to use it correctly. The play focuses on the story of Hamlet, but not from the viewpoint, but from the viewpoint of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and it also takes the theories proposed in Hamlet and presents them in a comic rather than a sullen manner. There's nothing really wonderful about that writing, but it does reflect a certain amount of understanding of words. Sullen is not the best word in the world, but it's a good word. And so it doesn't hurt to throw that in. What's an oxymoron?
It's like something that contradicts itself.
Very
Yes.
good. That's exactly what it is.
I think something.
So make yourself a list of good words that are useful to know. Irrefragable, ineluctable. These are general purpose words that can be used in any sentence where you want to say incontrovertible, but want to take it just another step higher. You see what I mean? I'd like to assign this and give everybody, I don't give specific assignments very often, but I think this would be something very useful for you all to have. Write a paragraph that's beautifully constructed, into which you can plug semantic content at will as necessary, so that you have something of your own that's superbly crafted that can be brought out and displayed at any point. And at some point, it's perfectly possible that some teacher's going to look at it and look it up and find that you had already written it somewhere else. Well, that's okay. You're allowed to quote yourself.
That's true.
Yeah. Does this make any sense? Okay, so let's do this as an assignment. It's just a paragraph, but see if you can put together a general purpose paragraph into which you can plug probably two contrasting things. Whereas this one, one can't but conclude that, you see what I mean? And if you have enough time to play with it, you can come with something, I'm sure, much more elaborate and refined than I can off the top of my head. One question I have here is, anybody familiar with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern?
I am.
Did we do that in class at one point?
Yeah, I think we did at one point. It was a while ago.
How many of you are familiar with Hamlet?
With who?
I'm
Hamlet,
close.
the play. Do we want to consider looking at it? I mean, it's Shakespeare's big play. Now, I don't want to do something that's going to repeat material for you, Dawson, but I'd like to do another big thing, especially if, well, we'll look at Pygmalion as well and just see what you'd like. Take a look at Pygmalion this week and we have the option of jumping into Hamlet. And what he describes here, of course, is exactly what it's a nice synopsis of what Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is all about, which is a Thomas Stoppard play that came out in the 1960s, with which follows the two minor characters, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who for some strange reason are not capitalized, through the play Hamlet, where they are very minor characters in the original play. In fact, they're so minor that Hamlet, though he's their friend, doesn't mind having them executed. But it's a fascinating play in itself. And if we look at it, it probably makes sense to look at Hamlet first. Okay, before we wind off, I'm afraid I'm running over already. Do you have enough homework?
Yep.
You got enough serious reading material to look through? We've got Gray's Elegy. We've got that entire tome on how to write poetry. Seriously, it's a great how-to book. It'll actually show you how to do things that so many people who call themselves poets nowadays haven't a clue about. It does a very nice job of that. Okay, I don't know what's going to happen with our classroom. At least now we will have a classroom if the other one vanishes.
Okay, cool.
And
we'll
then
see what we can do.
also, I still have that submitted project from the week before last in the new classroom.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's fine.
That's in the new classroom?
It's my blog entry. I don't know if you remember. 'Cause
Okay,
I wasn't quite sure what it
perhaps
was.
you could put that into
Yeah,
the
I'll
writer's
just copy
forum.
and paste it
Okay.
in the old classroom.
Also, I'm going to ask you folks if you wouldn't mind taking your vocabulary journals and putting them into the new classroom.
Okay.
Where should we plug those into?
Into the vocabulary journals forum, which is empty right now. I mean,
Oh,
it moved the
okay.
forum over, but it didn't
Gotcha,
move the
yeah.
content.
All right.
So where should we submit assignments now?
I guess we'll
writer's
go
forum
ahead
as
and
well.
submit them in the new classroom.
Okay. So is there a writer's
Yeah.
forum set up there?
Yeah, in the
Okay.
writer's forum, exactly the way they were before. I suppose I ought to go and get your old ones and bring them over.
Okay.
Go ahead and do that if you can.
All right.
Now, you sent the email, which I'm not receiving. So is it a way that I can manually write down the login information?
I don't
So I can
have the
just-
login information on top of my head because that was automatically generated by the new system. However, if you send me an email telling me I can't find it, and telling me
Can you just
what you'd like your
reply
password to
directly
be,
to that
I could
email?
go in and change your password to what you'd like it to be.
Okay. And I'd have to know the username as well. What would the username be?
Your username will be exactly the same as it was before. It's your email address.
Okay.
Those are unique, and most people know how to type their own email.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, yeah.
Have a good week, folks.
Lisa.
Let me know if you have any suggestions or questions.
Thank you.
Are we covering everything you need to cover those? I don't want to do too much covering things that you've already done already.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with them doing Hamlet again. Yeah, I mean, last year I did it in this class, and I was also having to read it in another class as well.
Did I actually do Resident Evil in this class last year?
I don't
I
think
know I
it
did
was,
it about 3 or 4 years ago.
I think it was the first year that I was here, so that was about 2 years ago. So,
Oh, okay.
so yeah, it's kind of.
Well, I want to find new material that really inspires, but I'm not sure what would inspire. I'm casting about.
Yeah, I'm not really quite sure myself,
Okay.
to be honest.
I'll try to find some other material to suggest.
Okay, but yeah, it's fine. We can do it again or anything else that.
Okay. And if you run out of homework, you can always invent more homework if you're out.
That's true.
Okay.
If I have the one time too.
I'm sorry.
Oh, if I have the one time too.
By all means. By all means.
Thank you. As always.
Have a good week. Okay, bringing class to an end.